Good morning and welcome to the event, Understanding and Using AI as a Congressional Intern, Tips and Tools from the Congressional Experts. We are so excited to host this event with our friends at the the Modernization Staff Association and the Capitol Hill Intern Association. My name is Taylor J. Swift. I am the Deputy Director of Governance and Innovation at the POPVOX Foundation. Those who are not familiar with us, we work with the Hill in pursuing innovation and making government work better, particularly with the focus on staff capacity, technology, and building bridges across silos. So make sure you stay up to date with all things Congress, all things tech, all things transparency with the First Branch Forecast. It's our weekly newsletter that's completely free. It actually came out about 2 hours ago. It comes out every Monday morning. And of course, we also write the Capitol Hill Intern Update, which is a free weekly newsletter that comes out on Tuesday mornings, specifically tailored for interns in Congress. Helps folks understand Congress better. We have fun stories. And of course, if there are events either on and off the Hill that are directly related to interns, we always try to link those as well. So be sure to subscribe to those 2 newsletters. I'm going to do a quick overview really quickly of what this event is going to be, and then I'll introduce our 2 experts here. So we'll do brief introductions for the panelists, and then each of us are going to kind of give brief backgrounds on our areas of expertise as it relates to AI usage in Congress. And then we'll do some demos and some use cases, what you can do, what you can't do, definitely some things around ethics and guidance. And then we're going to have a bit of a group discussion, but make sure if you're attending this and you have questions that are related to either your intern experience or your AI usage in your office, or if you're not using it, how to approach that, be sure to drop those questions in the chat. You can do it either with your name or you can do it anonymously. Please have those questions, throughout. We can answer them when we get to the discussion portion. So the more the merrier. We're here to help you as much as we can. So quick reminder as well, this event is being recorded. So if one of your colleagues couldn't make it or another intern in your office couldn't make it, we'll have a write-up of it, of all the key points, and obviously some of the things that are, really high-level things that were discussed in here. So as AI continues to take center stage in politics and pop culture around the world, the House and Senate staff and lawmakers are grappling with the effects of the rapidly advancing technology while also trying to capitalize on the benefits of artificial intelligence for internal use. In January alone of this year, both Committee on House Administration and the Senate Rules and Administration Committee held separate hearings on the use cases of AI within Congress and the legislative branch agencies. These new tools have capacity to empower staffers, democratize government information, and make Congress more efficient. In June of 2023, the Chief Administrative Officer approved ChatGPT for limited use in the House, but obviously there are tons of questions from not only staffers, but lawmakers as well of what can be done and what can't be. So this event today is going to kind of help clear up some of those questions, whether it's in drafting internal guidelines, introducing bills, addressing emerging problems. We're going to try to tackle all of those things today. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first expert. Jessica Smith is a Government Accountability Office detailee for the Committee on House Administration. Jess is an experienced federal leader who focuses on science and tech policy and legislative branch oversight. Jess is currently detailed with the House of Representatives Committee on House Administration, where she is making sure that the House takes the steps towards artificial intelligence use cases and has a solid footing. Jess has held a number of senior positions at GAO, where she was most recently a director of their science and tech team, where she had the honor of helping them grow their ranks while becoming a more nimble in products that they have and offer to Congress. So Jess, with that, I'm going to hand it to you.
Thanks so much, Taylor. Can you hear me okay? Okay, thanks for having us. We're excited to talk about our favorite topic, AI, for the next hour. I'll just take a few minutes and give the group a little bit of a broad brushstrokes overview of where CHA has been focused for the past 8 months or so. For those of you who don't know, the Committee on House Administration manages the daily operations that keep the House of Representatives running smoothly. Our budget authorizations for expenses of House committees is something that we focus on, and we also focus on the expenses of members of Congress themselves. The committee is responsible for oversight of the House officers, including the administrative and technical functions of the House. And with that remit, we have a long history of involvement in IT modernization, both in the House and in legislative branch agencies. So in the summer of 2023, we began to formulate an AI strategy for the House. And this was right at the point where ChatGPT and generative AI generally was just kind of exploding into the public consciousness. And so we came in and we wanted to get our hands around this and make sure that the House was really well positioned with a robust strategy for how we were going to use this very disruptive technology. So to start, we just kind of took an analysis of the relevant laws and regulations that were available for AI use in government. We did a relatively robust series of bipartisan stakeholder interviews, just hearing about, what the lay of the landscape was. And we held a series of in-depth kind of workflow analysis where we were looking at just specific core functions, for example, casework, to understand what the tools were that people were using and whether or not those tools had any AI-enabled functionality in them. And from there, we established a plan with a number of core elements. And a lot of this is really grounded in the legislation that had been passed, the AI in government use. And so we were looking at a few things. First, was there an initial AI governance assessment by CIOs, by high-level agency executives that was in place? Were there steering committees or governance boards that were being stood up? Were there staff-level working groups that were being stood up? And then really looking at whether or not we had the right kind of AI tiger teams, if you will, to speak kind of loosely, that were being put in place to kind of field the great ideas that are coming out of different areas, be able to assess those ideas and start making concrete tactical progress with them, and turning those ideas into actual AI solutions. So with those elements, in the fall of 2023, we started benchmarking the agencies that CHA has oversight responsibilities for. Now, we didn't do all of our agencies, we just did a subset to start, and that included the Chief Administrative Office, the Clerk's Office, GPO, and the Library of Congress. So just a subset of our oversight responsibilities, but we really wanted to hone in on the legislative workflow when it came to AI and really focus on the House. And so we requested monthly updates from these entities, and we requested a few things. Number one, that everyone was transparent in how we were using AI. And that led to some really good, public websites and a lot more visibility into how the Ledge Branch was actually using AI already. We were asking about steps they're taking to put the NIST framework in place, generally towards AI governance. And they were asking around efforts for what we were all doing to make sure that everyone was upskilling into kind of AI tools in a relatively robust way. And so we published a bunch of flash reports. This is over the whole fall. We saw a lot of progress. And in particular, I think CIO and CHA worked very closely together to kind of internally inventory all of the AI use cases that existed within the House, and then to publish some of that externally. And we kind of capped that work with a hearing in January that looked at AI innovations in the legislative branch. And then, so where are we going from here? We had, this kind of great monthly reporting, this hearing. Looking into 2024, we've expanded our oversight work. So we're now not just looking at the agencies that I just mentioned, but we've also added in the Smithsonian, the Architect of the Capitol, and the U.S. Capitol Police. And so we're asking those three agencies, in addition to GPO, Library of Congress, CIO, and the Clerk, to continue reporting monthly in terms of governance steps and transparent use cases. We're continuing to work with CIO to make sure that, in particular, as we, the House, articulate an AI policy, we want to make sure that it's prudent and reasonable, and it's really well positioned regardless of what future AI policy and legislation come down the pike. So we're focused on this first step of building a strong, stable foundation. And then we're planning a series of both private and public roundtables over the remainder of 2024. And these will focus on everything from AI guardrails to AI acquisitions to how state and local governments are using AI. And so with that, Taylor, I will turn the floor back over to you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Jess. And I really want to emphasize and stress a lot of what Jess just said about Congress really being at the head of the curve of a lot of this. Traditionally there is this understanding by folks that either work in government or just even the public and constituents more generally, that Congress is always behind on examining and overseeing things, especially like emergent technologies or things like that. But this is really a testament to both of you and your agencies and your committees to really look at this stuff and being extremely proactive to see how it can empower everyone, not only lawmakers and staff, but the institution as a whole, like helping Congress better respond to the needs of constituents, using these tools as an additive value rather than running away from something. And so it's just fantastic to see. I do want to mention, I forgot to mention off the top, we actually had a third panelist. One of my colleagues, Aubrey Wilson, was supposed to be here in attendance. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it today. So I'm going to do her background on her behalf. But Aubrey put together this absolutely amazing resource that I am going to drop in the chat for the attendees, and then will be available in the links afterwards for those who are watching virtually after the fact. But if you want to click on that link, we actually put together 3 steps for the modern intern for using Gen AI and AI in Congress. And I'm actually going to share my screen really quickly so that we can kind of go through this together. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Perfect. Okay. So the 3 steps we have. So first step, and arguably the most important, is know the ropes. So there are already, like Jess mentioned, and Stephen will go into, there's already institutional guidance that has been set forth by both chambers of Congress on what Gen AI use cases and tools could be. So for the House, we just talked about ChatGPT Plus. The Senate also offers it as well. But for the House, it's only really authorized for research and evaluation tasks, whereas in the Senate, it's a little more there's a little more flexibility per office. The Senate also allows right now Google's Bard AI and Microsoft's Bing AI chat. So those are also authorized. One of the most important things to remember, and I know we're probably going to talk about this quite extensively, but we need to make sure when utilizing these tools that this can only be used with non-sensitive data. So when you're using ChatGPT, you must be using these with privacy setting enabled. Like, this is very, very, very important for folks that are going to be adopting this within their office workflow. So just please remember, if there's one major thing you want to take away, it's make sure these pieces are enabled when you're utilizing these things. Office guidance is going to be really, really, really important, because each specific office, every office within the House and the Senate, they can set their own internal AI use cases. So regardless of how familiar or not familiar with, regardless of how good you are with some of these tools, you need to make sure that your office is okay with this use. So please, after this event, if you haven't already talked to some of your colleagues or your supervisors about using and utilizing these tools, please do so. So we also have in this link that I'll share with those watching, there is a great guide to how to start a conversation with some of your colleagues about what to do and how to use this. So that's going to be hyperlinked in this office guidance section. So a great thing that you can do and to stand out as an intern is be proactive and create an opportunity for you to foster innovation in your office by becoming familiar with this technology so that you can use it in a way that helps your office thrive and adopt it in its daily workflow. So identifying tasks that you can use these large language models with, sometimes, Offices are allowing drafting for constituent communications, some not. Some help with all staff emails, some don't. Some help with research gathering. These are all questions that you're going to be wanting to talk to your colleagues and your supervisors about. But this gives interns the chance to be proactive and stand out by asking if this is something that you can add in it. Of course, step 3, there is a really, really steep learning curve for things, but you can't spell AI or aid without AI. And so with the emergence of all of these tools, you know, Congress is a very, very confusing place, especially if this is your first internship or first time experiencing kind of the day-to-day operations of being in an office. There's a huge gap between, at least for me personally, when I was an intern, of what you're expecting and how it actually is executed. So you can actually use AI to help bridge that gap and kind of close that gap. And so things like helping answer questions about CRS reports or looking up key terms to better understand the legislative process, like all of these things can be addressed within some of these large language models. So here you can try some of these sample prompts that we've created for you so that you and maybe even your intern coordinator can kind of learn. So can you explain the 3 biggest differences between the US House and the Senate floor procedure? ChatGPT will give you a great summary. And if you ask for sources, it could also help provide some of those sources. Same with something like the National Defense Authorization Act, how that process works for that bill, just getting like general understandings of some of the legislative processes, key terms, all of those things you can definitely do with AI. So this document, like I mentioned, will be available for folks to use after this chat. So really, really excited for that. So with that, I'm going to hand it to our next expert here, Stephen Dwyer, a man who doesn't need a ton of introductions because he's extremely well known around the Hill. But Stephen Dwyer is a Senior Director for Innovation at the House of Representatives Office of Chief Administrator. Stephen is helping lead the House of Representatives' internal innovation efforts from the CAO, working with the House Digital Service team to build new apps and adopt new technologies like AI. Prior to 2023, Steve worked for Democratic leadership in the House for 20 years, focusing on tech policy, digital strategy, and one of my personal favorite things, modernizing Congress. He is the lead staffer behind the development of both the Dome Watch app. For folks that are not plugged in on the Dome Watch app, it is an absolutely essential use if you want to stick around with understanding Congress and the legislative process. And the DemCom intranet for Dem staff, both widely still used on the Hill. I'm going to pass it over to you, Stephen.
Great. Thanks, Taylor. Good to see you, Jess, and good to see everyone here today. Thanks to Taylor and POPVOX for this, not only today's event, but also this great new report that they're releasing today. I especially love the picture on the first page. I hear Taylor drew that by hand. But it really is a great resource that covers all the basic rules, which is important for all of you interns on the call today to understand. Yeah, I appreciate all of Jess's work. Worked with her a lot over the past year. She covered a lot of the basics, a lot of the work that's gone on. What we like to generally call governance. Are we allowed to use AI? How exactly? What tools? That's maybe not as relevant to interns, but it is critical because you wouldn't have been able to use these tools right now today if it wasn't for the work of Jess and other people like the head of our cybersecurity department here in the CIO's office where I currently work. And so a lot of work has been going on behind the scenes to get us where we are. And I appreciate Taylor talking about how great it is, because it's not all that common for government institutions to sort of quickly move on these new emerging technology fronts. But I about a year ago, as Jess and others were working on the governance, I was the lucky one that they'd said, hey, can you just, try and find out how offices are using AI and how they should be using AI. And so it's been a lot of fun over the past year to work with a lot of offices and a lot of staff on the best use cases and exploring these great new tools, mostly ChatGPT, because that's what's approved in the House. So what we did, way back in June, once we got the ChatGPT authorization, is we formed a working group with a bunch of staffers. We had over 200 staffers sign up, and we bought a number of ChatGPT licenses. Now, they're only $20 a month. They're not exactly expensive, but it proved to be a very good carrot to get offices to actually report back on how they're using it. The idea was, we'll give you a license if you promise to tell us how you're using it. And it really did work well. And we recently concluded that, but for about 7 months there, we were regularly collecting good reports from office staff. And so this is very relevant for all the interns. It's exactly how most of you interns, I assume, are working in member offices or committee or leadership offices, but probably mostly member. And we just really worked with about 150 offices, got those licenses because we cycled them through to a bunch of different offices. And we got lots of great feedback from most of those offices. And so I can just cover that real quickly for you. The basic use cases are not surprising to anyone. They're not specific to Congress, but they are very useful for congressional operations. And that is like the big two are first drafts of documents. And so, a lot of people say it's like wonderful to get over the writer's block, sort of, just to have a first draft, even if it's not a great draft, something to work with and to edit and to get your mind working. And when I say documents, it can be anything. It was, constituent letters is usually the most popular one. That's probably the most popular on this call for interns, since you spend a whole lot of your time doing constituent letters, I imagine, if it's still the same as when I was an intern. But it's not just constituent letters. It's also office memos. It's speeches for the boss. It's something smaller, tweets. It's, Facebook posts, and everything in between. So basically any written product, which is so much of what a congressional office does. The first draft is something that ChatGPT does very well. And we'll talk more about tips for how to get the best first drafts, but that's the big one. And then the second big one is summarizing large blocks of text. So, congressional office bombarded constantly with 20-page report from some think tank, that happens 10 times a day. Well, if you don't have time to read that 20-page report, you can throw it to ChatGPT and say, give me a 1-page summary, and it does a quite good job at that. And not just reports, but any long documents. I hear a lot of offices do the transcript from a congressional hearing, and they ask for ChatGPT to summarize that. That's a great, more specific to Congress example. So beyond those big two, there were a number of other use cases reported by offices. It's great at proofreading. So maybe not as the first draft, but maybe the last draft. Maybe after you think you're done. A lot of people said it's kind of like spell check and grammar check on steroids. It's just very good sort of at the end. It's also good at like asking it to, how would you suggest I rephrase this paragraph or whatever? It's a very good in things like that. It's very good at Excel formulas. Now, some people like myself, a little math-minded, I really enjoy Excel formulas. I actually know how to, do computer code, and so it's not that hard for me. But I know a lot of people are very intimidated by Excel formulas. Well, guess what? You just have, it's great at it. You just have to say, I want an Excel formula for X, Y, Z, alphabetizing in, if then, and it'll write the formula for you. You cut and paste it right into Excel. It works great. Lots of offices said that they are using Excel in more advanced ways than ever before, thanks to ChatGPT. And then some other very congressional specific use cases. My favorite one is definitely the bill title acronym. So very common congressional problem. You release a bill, it needs to have a short name, preferably with the first letter of each word in the title that makes a, cute little acronym. So the one example given in one of our reports was an office had a bill for something related to animal welfare, and they wanted the title to spell out bark because they wanted it to be the Bark Act. And so it turns out ChatGPT is fantastic at that. I've definitely played that game inside my office previously. It's really hard. It's really hard to be clever and creative in coming up with those acronyms. It turns out it's a great use case for LLMs like ChatGPT. And then there's other things like a lot of offices say that they have 50 members to sign on to a letter, but they just have the members list in a spreadsheet. Well, you can very quickly say, look at this list, but format them with REP period, space, first name, space, last name, open parentheses, state dash district, that sort of thing. Now, again, you could do that with Excel formulas, but you can also do that directly into ChatGPT, and they'll just give you a clean list that you can just paste into the bottom of a letter that you're working on. I will also point out, if you're working on a member letter, that also can be done automatically for you in the Quill tool, which most offices are using and is a great resource. But okay, so that's a quick overview of the use cases offices are using. And I'm just quickly going to go to some more general tips, and then I'll hand it back over to Taylor for more questions. But like general tips we learned is that offices say, like, you got to be specific. Like, your prompts need to be long and iterative, where ask it, and if it is not exactly what you're looking for, ask it again and again. Follow-up questions. Within a single session, it'll remember all your previous questions and all the previous work it already did, so you don't have to repeat yourself, at least within a session. And so that's like really critical. If you ask it a very general question, you're going to get a very general answer that's sort of not specific to your task. And of course, almost all of our tasks get more and more specific. So feel free, the more information you get it, the less likely it is to hallucinate. If you give it very general nothing, you're going to get some really fluffy generalized that may not be actually accurate. But the more detail you get, the better. So that's one of the top. Another thing is popular is ask it to like give you a step-by-step analysis, because then it actually this is a tip just generally that you can read out there. It makes the tool more like smarter, where it actually has to follow a process and show how it arrived at a conclusion, for example. That's one tip. And finally, like, the underlying data is just so important. One thing, back to first drafts, voice is a big thing. That's always has been one of the hardest things about being in comms on the Hill. You have to learn how to write in your boss's voice. And ChatGPT actually isn't great with that off the bat. I mean, it actually is pretty good at things like write in the voice of a Southern conservative congresswoman or a Midwest progressive. Like, it's actually pretty good at that. But that's not always specific enough for your office. So instead, it's best to say, my boss is a Midwest progressive, or whatever your boss is. And here are a few examples of her voice, or him or her voice. And so then you paste in, and again, this goes back to the sensitive data. Don't, put in any sensitive data, any unreleased speech. But if your boss has some public speeches that are out there, you can use the text of that to sort of give it your voice. So it is very good at not just the first drafts, but first drafts in particular voices, which could even be your own boss's voice. And then, so think about using data, again, not, data that's already been made public, because you don't want to risk any sensitive data. But another thing to think about as interns, I love this use case in office. I was talking to recently about it. They want to empower their interns. Interns mostly are answering phones all day. Interns, really, all the callers are generally two things. One is, I want to weigh in on a hot topic and get the boss's position. And so for that, the office was actually playing with a little chatbot for interns, but it's all about good data. So for them, it was about seeding the current 20 most hottest topics. And they actually had like a little guide of, like, they're essentially constituent letters of how the boss feels about those 20 top issues. But if you see that into an LLM, a new intern can just sort of play with it and, what is the boss's position on immigration? Boom. And you get the response that you're supposed to say. And of course, a good office already does this in paper, but you could do it in a chatbot. And then the second thing the callers will call about is casework. That's much more sensitive in terms of you want to make sure you're not putting in any PII, or you don't want to play around with AI tools with that. But again, good data. If an office has a nice tree, which I know as you interns, when you start and you're answering phones, a lot of them do. They got good memos. Offices have good memos on, they ask about this, tell them to call the district office here, tell them to go to the website and start filling out the digital privacy form if they are opening a case. That kind of information. If you have good data, like the good documents that train interns, well, then that can also train AI and you know, documents that can be used, again, only if non-sensitive. So that's just some more advanced things to think about. But I think I'll stop talking now, Taylor, and hand it back to you.
No, all those use cases were great. Super practical. The amount of hours, and I know probably both of us have felt this way, the amount of hours that I spent as a congressional staffer trying to think of bill acronym names, and oh my gosh, how fun that technology would be when I was there. Oh man, that was so cool. So definitely, if you're on this call, that's a great use case for sure. We're gonna go to the Q&A portion. So all three of us will kind of have some questions, but of course, if you have questions, like feel free to drop them in the chat. I know I already see one here, but feel free to drop some in. The first question I have, I'm going to go, Jess, we're going to go to you first, and then Stephen, if you have anything to add. So can you explain the differences between congressional offices adopting and utilizing AI tools and Congress regulating AI overall? I know we kind of talked about, the guardrail things you brought up earlier, but just to make sure folks kind of know the difference, because there can be some confusion there.
Yeah, no, this is a great question. Thanks, Taylor. And I love it because, when I think about AI and how disruptive it is, I really do think it's one of the first technologies that is like growing out of the IT space and really involves, heavy effort from policy and from business and from folks in the like ethics and sociology world. And so, there's this mix of policy and practice that is making the AI discussion so interesting kind of nationally. But I guess to directly answer the question, when a typical Hill staffer who is focused on AI is focused on policy that will regulate the executive branch, right? So we're focused on kind of national policy. What we're doing here is trying to not get in front of any of that policy, because obviously there's a pretty robust policy landscape that's going on right now, but to just take the foundational underpinnings and apply it here in our space and in the legislative branch. And I guess if there's a minute for a little bit extra to that question. Okay, I also would say just in general, in like the history of the legislative branch, like we have always lagged behind the executive branch when it comes to how quickly we adopt new technology. And this has been true forever. Even, if you go back to like the onset of the internet, or, or like even kind of mobile devices, BlackBerries and, and apps and stuff like that, we were always years behind. And it's just not acceptable. And we really have to like fight that pacing problem, because when it comes to AI and also all of the data that's needed to kind of, that the AI tools are like leveraging, the executive branch is pouring out reams of big data. And if we don't get really smart really quickly around how we're going to absorb that data, synthesize it, and use it for effective oversight, then we're just going to be falling further and further behind.
Stephen, anything to add?
Yeah, I just say there's a lot of confusion over this. Like, obviously, lots of members of Congress are working on national AI policy bills, that would impact the entire global economy and all the big tech companies and everything. We're in a much smaller lane, which is just, how can Congress utilize these tools in order to improve our own day-to-day lives, which is the same as every company and every industry are doing the same conversations. How can we use it? How can we use it safely? How can we, improve our efficiencies and also not get harmed by it? Like losing data, biases, the other concerns that are legitimate with these tools. So we're just it's a smaller lane. It's a little more easy for us to sort of deal with. I also think it would, as sort of Jess was saying, it is better, I think, having been around tech policy on the national scale at my old job, like it's better when members actually have some hands-on experience when they're dealing with these things. And I know just using ChatGPT for, inside an office is sort of a minimal use case, but it still is informative for offices to sort of have a basic understanding of how a lot of people use these tools.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with either of you. Both of you explained it so well. I'm going to go to our first attendee question. So it kind of actually deals with what we were just talking about. So the question is, what measures can be taken to reach marginalized communities who may not have access to or be comfortable with AI tech? So
I can jump in. Yeah, I had the luxury of looking at the question while Steve was talking, so I got a little bit more of a heads up. And there's kind of two parts to that, right? There's how do you reach a marginalized community, and then there's that community or individual's perception of AI. And I would suggest like splitting those two off, because there are lots of instances where you can use an AI technology to reach someone and it's beneficial for them, whether or not they know that we're using an AI technology to get to them, or to help them. So, and there's a few really good use cases as an example. So like transcription of hearings is a really good one. If that is done real time, or if that's even better yet, like plugged into a browser that has translation capabilities, then all of a sudden you have a much more like a wider pool of access of people who can pay attention to a hearing and understand what lawmakers, and policymakers are talking about in that hearing. So that's just one example. And then there are two others that came to mind, just thinking not so much about the House itself, but just the legislative branch, where people are taking really, really smart, careful use cases. One of them is using optical character recognition to help low vision library patrons be able to read more books, right? So that was a really great use case. And then also the government printing office is using enhanced search to help their human phone operators who get a phone call from somebody who might not want to use the internet at all and is trying to find a government publication. Well, that person who is talking to a citizen on the phone is being supported by an enhanced search capability that's relying on machine learning and capabilities there to get them to the right document that they want.
Yeah, and I love those disability examples that Jess gave, very good ones. I think the question probably, it was raised right before our prior conversation, was I think it was originally more towards the national policy, and of course we're trying to stay more focused on the individual, but Jess's examples are within Congress lane. And I would just add that this past year we did just a lot of experimenting to see if this is useful inside the House. And I know from the CIO's office, from testifying at a hearing from our deputy CIO recently, committed to over the next year, we're going to be rolling out more educational opportunities for House staff. So maybe speaking to the question, at least within the House community, where absolutely some groups are more likely to use and be aware and more comfortable with these tools than others. Well, we're going to try to make it more accessible for everyone by adding things to the staff academy, where if you go there now, there's actually LinkedIn Learning, where there's lots of general AI classes if you want to just get up to steam, get up to speed on learning the basics, a lot of this stuff. Other resources, just want to plug real quick, digitalservice.house.gov/AI is where our current guidance and information, where you can see a lot of the pitfalls and dangers to watch out for. And then finally, I'd just add POPVOX is a great resource for this. So if you go to their popvox.org, and then under their issues, you can go to AI, and you can see a lot of what they released only a couple weeks ago, the prompt guide is really great use. And I'm sure this new intern guide will also go on there soon, I bet.
I would also suggest sometimes AI, just as a topic, can feel exciting, but also intimidating. And in all of the resources that Steve just named, there's a lot just in terms of data analysis, data literacy, data cleaning, data work with data that's also available in the same kind of channels. And I would put a plug in for that too, if the AI stuff feels a little bit too much for anybody.
Yeah, I mean, you both are so correct. I completely agree with all of the resources, all of the pieces that you mentioned. I will say, as the folks that are watching this and are attending this, if you continue to utilize these resources and better understand it, that kind of empowerment and agency at the staffer level will help you and your office better address these kind of questions for your constituents and your communities within your district or within your state, which then can help you better problem solve how to have folks have better access or how to help them feel more comfortable. So by you learning more about this and by you staying engaged in how the legislative branch and how your office can utilize these, then you can take the step further and also help address these kind of questions within your communities too, because you better understand it as well. So I completely agree with our experts and just want to echo, the more power you have and the more understanding you have with these, the more of a value add it's going to be for you and your member in your office. So the next question we have is kind of, I guess, a little bit about what I just said. So how can offices ensure that their teams are up to date with advancements in AI within Congress? So Steve, I know you just mentioned it, but I just want to go back to you one more time about some of those trainings that are offered.
Yeah, so currently we don't have any specific trainings, but we will soon later this year. It's going to be, we're still sort of working out the details, but it'll be certainly something that's discussed, in the existing classes, like you got the LC class and there's an intern class. There's a new staffer class. Another thing that we've been working on that Jess has been spending a lot of time on is that there's going to be like a high level sort of AI policy for the House that's going to be coming out soon. And so, of course, when staffers go to the Staff Academy for their, first onboarding class, learning about the House AI policy is something we want to tell all new staff. So that's something that just a concrete example, but we're looking, across all the different educational offerings that we currently have and thinking about where AI could fit in. And yeah, so there will be in the future more sort of pages and resources on that as we roll out more. But I was saying that currently the best guidance and resources is on digitalservice.house.gov/AI, where you can find information, including all the detailed reports from what I mentioned earlier about the 7 months of working with the 150 offices and getting all their feedback, including lots of specific quotes from those offices, which a lot of them are kind of fun and interesting to see how offices specifically reported using the tool.
Yeah, super, super helpful. And yeah, everybody just make sure you're plugged in on when those resources come out. And if, like I mentioned at the top, our organization has 2 newsletters, one for full-time staff and of course for interns. Please subscribe to both. If we have updates from either the CAO or from the CHA or any other committee or agency of jurisdiction, we're going to be including those in all of our updates as well. So you can have that kind of stuff when it's announced. So the next question I'm going to go to, we touched on it in some of our background, but I kind of just want to go over it one more time because I think it's really important, and I know you guys do too. What measures have been put in place to help guardrail against some of the safety around using AI within an office? Jess, I'm going to kind of start with you. This is going to kind of be, security of what can be included, what can't be included, kind of that private information stuff. So go for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the first thing that I'll say is like we're not starting from scratch in this space. So the House already does have a really strong process already in place for approving cloud-based software. And that's kind of the process that protects us as an institution and is protecting us with some of these new AI tools and websites that we could go to. So the first step is really making sure that we're funneling into that approval process because it gives us the chance to review the websites that are in question or the tools and make sure that we don't have any kind of anticipated problem with them. And, beyond that, just, the idea of like, how do we balance risk with reward? How do we balance, innovation and risk? This is really challenging. It is much easier to just block every website that poses a risk to the institution and say, we can't do that. In a short-term kind of myopic view of things, that is the way to go, right? It's easy and we can manage it. But the problem is that we don't get anywhere, and it's just not going to cut it in the long run for us as an institution, as a country. Like, we have to figure out how do we maintain prudent and risk managed, appropriate kind of posturing when it comes to new technology. And the way I see it, like AI is just the first wave of this. There's lots of new disruptive technology coming down the pike. So just everything that's going on with generative AI, it's just the first wave here. So it's just an opportunity to get this right. So we're trying to just take a kind of more flexible approach. And a lot of that is just because of the massive opportunity that this presents us with.
Yeah, and I'll just add, like, she mentioned the cloud approval process. You know, I get a lot of questions from staffers and interns saying, you know, why can I only use ChatGPT Plus? Why can't I use the free version or Google Bard, et cetera? And the reason is that process that was longstanding that we go through of approving cloud services, which these cloud-based LLMs fall under. It's not just a technical review, although we certainly do that, you know, and make sure that these companies are sound companies that can be trusted, and you know, where are they physically located, where are they, you know, with their servers and everything, and their governance. But it's also a lot of legal questions. Like we have heightened legal requirements in the legislative branch. And this actually does come into play occasionally, usually only in rare situations, but it's where, like, say an executive branch subpoenas documents from us. Well, that's not a normal situation. That is like a division of constitutional branches of government situation, and it requires heightened data security. So the companies need to know that this isn't a normal sort of subpoena. And so that's just one example of what our lawyers do with these companies when we consider. So, for example, OpenAI, you know, a year ago was actually very quick to say, you know, we are excited about doing business with the House of Representatives, and we're willing to change our terms and conditions and our legal protections in order to get approval for House users. When a lot of companies don't. I mean, they're just busy on other things and responding to the House's globally not such a big player, maybe, and so we often just don't even hear back from companies when we ask for those heightened legal protections. Just one example. There's other things that go into the process, but that's an example of how we try to keep the House safe data. But yeah, back to your Taylor. Most important for interns, you know, non-sensitive data. Don't put any sensitive data, any internal data. Office permission. Don't use these tools without permission. Make sure not only your supervisor, like the intern coordinator, but you know, hopefully they also have permission from the chief. Transparency around use. Like if I was, for a long time, I edited intern letters. And if I was editing intern letters, I want to know if AI had a role in generating the letter. Like, so even if you're approved for use, also tell people, like, every time you use it, like, that's just, you know, transparency is just good. You know, it might influence the editing process to know the origin of the letter, and that's a good thing. And so those are the most important takeaways for security for you all.
Absolutely. And to echo what both of you said, you know, using these practices, these best practices, especially if you're an intern or a junior staffer and this is a new realm for your office, like this is a huge value add for you as an employee to present to your colleagues. Like if you understand the guidance and the parameters that our experts here are giving you, that are, you know, from CHA and from the CAO, you present these to your colleagues of, hey, like we can actually utilize these through, you know, drafting and all the examples that we've talked about, you know, that could be a pretty illuminating thing for your office's workflow. And again, that's a huge return on investment for all of you and for you specifically to highlight that. So, you know, as you're thinking about action items from this event, those are some of the things we absolutely want you all to take away from today. So we're going to wrap up here soon. So if anybody has any remaining questions, please pop them in the Q&A portion. I'm going to take a step back. This last question that I have for both of you, and Jess, we can start with you and then go to Stephen. This one's a little more vague, but it's a little more fun. So, you know, it doesn't have to be anything that you have down the pipeline. I know we've all talked about things that CAO and CHA want to do in the future, but kind of looking forward, how do you see AI evolving in the context of government and public service more broadly? So Jess, go for it.
Well, that's a big one to end with, right? I mean, I really think it's going to be everywhere, right? I like looking at like kind of historical precedent and thinking about how it would apply today. And I was reading, I think it was last week, there was an architect of the Capitol blog, and it was talking about the lights in the Capitol. And it like really blew me away because I mean, this is an institution that has existed before electricity. Like there weren't even wires to turn the lights on. And, you know, we adapted to that and now it's everywhere and you can't imagine life without it. And, you know, the same has been true for so many different technical innovations and, you know, the internet and email and everything else. And so, you know, just put in that like massive macro perspective, this is something that is going to impact every single person in this institution. And so we just need to kind of take whatever steps we can take to reasonably embrace it a little bit every single day with the guidance that's coming out, you know, and everything else. But I really look at it as a complete game changer.
And yeah, I agree. I generally am like an optimist. I think it can really help government in lots of ways. You know, it can automate a lot of mundane tasks, and everyone who's worked in government knows that there's lots of mundane tasks out there to automate. Hope, you know, it can improve on a lot of work that people honestly, you know, is not great work. I also, you know, I think so much of AI is both over-exaggerated and under-exaggerated. So, like, I think it actually will improve operations and really fundamentally change how everyone works. You know, it's a little bit controversial, like even on the first draft thing right now. But I mean, I think in only a couple years, I mean, it's just the first drafts are going to be just made for you, like right inside Word and Outlook and Gmail and everything else. You know, it's just going to be completely normal for everyone on first drafts everywhere. So like, I think it's going to be completely ubiquitous. And so, I'm very, you know, optimistic in those areas. But I also think like I don't think it's going to be replacing a lot of jobs. You know, because I think everyone's going to have to know how to use these things. But it's also like I don't think we're that close to general intelligence where these things still aren't making great decisions, and so it still needs humans everywhere. So yeah, I'm generally very excited and optimistic about this in Congress and for government.
Absolutely. I'll echo what both of you said. Much like the adoption of the telephone and email and everything like that, right? There is a curve to things, and you know, new things, especially of this kind of magnitude that can change a workflow, can be a little scary. But we've been saying this entire time that if you continue to learn about it and better understand it, like this can be a huge value add for your time and just oversight and better understanding how to utilize your office's operations the best way. And so we are also at POPVOX Foundation just very like pro adopting this to help the institution work better, to help with everything that is facing the American people and our world at large today, to help better respond to constituents and casework, to help better draft legislation, to better collaborate across the aisle and with colleagues. All of that is possible with these tools. And so with that, we're gonna wrap up today. So I just want to say huge thank you to both of our panelists today, Jessica Smith from CHA and of course Stephen Dwyer from the CAO. Thank you so much for your background and expertise. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we will be posting this event on our POPVOX Foundation website on popvox.org in the coming week. We'd love any feedback. If there is some outstanding questions that you didn't want to ask today, feel free to reach out to myself at taylor@popvox.org. And thank you so much for being here and supporting this as you navigate your either internship opportunity or you're just starting out on the Hill. Thanks so much for attending, and thanks again. Everybody have a great Monday.